Yeah, I see those.
Mr. Mayor, we're streaming.
Okay.
Got it.
Well, good evening, folks, and thank you for joining us. We will now call to order the Riverside City Council work session for Thursday, May 9th, 2024. If you're able to, please join us and rise to pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Brown?
Here.
Mr. Denning?
Here.
Ms. Fry?
Here?
Mr. Joseph?
Yes.
Ms. Lomach?
Yes.
Mr. Maxfield? Mayor Williams?
Here.
Move to excuse. Second.
We have a motion from Mr. Joseph and a second from Mr. Brown to excuse the deputy mayor. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Thank you. Mr. Manager, any additions or corrections to the agenda as presented?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion from Ms. Lomach and a second from Mr. Denning to approve the agenda as published. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Agenda is approved. Moving right along the agenda, I'll turn it over to the city manager for agenda item number 7, which is an update from Liquor Control on an address in our city.
Correct. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Pursuant to some information that we shared with council earlier this week, this is a liquor control application for a restaurant that intends to go in at 5418 Burkhardt Road. The restaurant has received zoning approval. There were no concerns on the background check. This does not require any council action, but should you wish to make an objection, I'll need to put it on the agenda for our next regular meeting. So unless I have a consensus or an indication that you want to object, we can move right along to the next item.
And just so I think I'm aware, I'm guessing the members of council with me are aware that this is the former Odd Bodies, former McGuffey's address.
Correct, and the intended use is a Mexican restaurant.
Okay.
With music?
It's actually a condition that Ms. Holt placed on the property as part of the zoning application. Music will be permitted in a limited fashion and only on weekends, similar to other restaurants in the area.
Good job.
Okay. Well, hearing no other voices from council, I think the city manager can take that as us being notified of the application, and hopefully we'll be able to welcome them to our community and dine there often. And maybe sing there sometimes. You can sing at La Guadalupana if you want to. I've sang there. Not voluntarily. I was bullied into it. We will move along to our monthly update from Finance, Community Development, and the Administration. So right back over to the city manager. And Kim, we're in a meeting now, so I need you to be professional, not laughing at my jokes.
Okay. No laughing at your jokes.
She usually makes me laugh during meetings. Now I can return the favor.
If you don't want people to laugh, you shouldn't tell jokes, just saying.
Okay, fine. All right, Josh.
She's tough, I'm telling you.
I know. Not getting anything past.
And she's right.
And she is correct. That's the worst part. Put that in the minutes.
Yes, that Kim was right.
And it's the worst.
So we've got the financial report.
Okay. Over the past month, we've met with our insurance company 3 times, once so that we could talk about our renewal for the year, another time to talk about some risk assessment, and then the last time was to address some IT risk assessments like cybersecurity. We have received their suggestions and will compile some plans for addressing what they've suggested. The Shared Resource Center has been in twice too, and we've talked about some long-term planning. We have some different scenarios that we've lined up so that we can come to council and kind of show you guys at some point what different scenarios mean as far as our long-term financial stability goes when we talk about levies and things like that.
Can you pull that just a little bit closer?
Oh, I'm
The mic,
sorry.
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 The cord's a little short though, so you're good.
The GAP financial compilation is still ongoing. The very last piece is the fixed asset piece. I'm sure everyone's aware that that's just a lot of work. But as soon as that's done, we'll have some financials. And at the end of the month, the auditors will be on site, so the last week of May, assuming that I can pull these assets together, which I'm sure we can do. My finance assistant, Michelle Elliott, has been a great asset as far as that goes. So we have a lot of human assets around here that are great to have, but I need to figure out where all the physical assets are.
What happened?
What?
What happened? We didn't have a list?
We do have a list. It's just a list from all time. And so,
So no one ever like cleaned it up?
yeah, there's pieces of it that have been addressed. It's just trying to hone in on what's the most accurate detail based on what we can actually put our hands on.
So you're finding like nacho cheese warmers from 1989?
Yeah, well, that's a good one. I was going to go with, we have found a garden that's pretty overgrown, and we've got to go pull up some weeds and trim back some things and figure out what we've actually got.
So where is it?
That's part of the question.
That's part of our question.
I've got a tractor and a plow, and
We may need it.
we can just plow it under and start over.
Right.
Yeah, and some of it just has to do with thought processes on what actually constitutes an asset versus what does not. And so my thoughts are a little bit different than what I'm seeing. So service utility is a big part of whether something's an asset or not. Right. We'll get there.
That's anything over, what did you put your number on?
I think the former policy was, you mean the threshold for an asset? I believe it was $1,000.
Yeah, our financials say that it's 1,000. Our auditors are suggesting that I up that to 5,000, which seems more accurate to me. And also, we had a 1-year threshold. I'd like to make that 3 or 5, depending on what council decides with me. So we'll work on that policy and bring it to you as well, once we get to that point. And Mr. Jim is going to help me, which is awesome, so thank you for him.
Well, the last time it was probably any attention paid to it was when we moved.
Oh, into these buildings?
Mhm.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
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 I have seen lists of assets, but they probably go back to when we moved over here.
There are definitely lists, yes.
And the values were different then, too, so.
Right.
Right. I just need to get back to acquisition costs, so we'll get there, though. I did want to thank council, all of finance wants to thank council for the decisions made as far as the last 2 contracts. Everyone in the city appreciates that you've redone Josh's contract for him, because without him, I don't think that the city would be where it's at. And then also for Mr. Jim Miller, he's only on day 4, but I can tell you that many people already appreciate him being here. Okay? All right, my last piece is in an envelope or a folder on your space. So these are the financials through the end of April. I can tell you that this is the first month that I've been able to completely reconcile within the first week of the following month, which was one of my goals. When we look through here, the first part is our expense report. I did print the entire thing so that you could, if you want to, you can go through and see what things look like. But really, the big idea is on the very last page. You can see that our total budget was $34.8 million. We have year-to-date expenses of 11.7 approximately. And then we have encumbrances open currently, which means we have dedicated to spend those monies. We have purchases in process for $4.8 million. The budget is a little bit inflated just because of the way income tax revenues were treated before. They would go into a fund, and then we would transfer them into 2 other funds. We're no longer doing that this year. So some of this will be cleaned up through the year, so future financials will look slightly different as far as those inflated numbers. The next packet is the revenue report. This will give you an idea of what we thought our revenue was going to be coming in for the year and what we've collected through the end of April. One note on the revenue report is that our EMS collection company called United, it's through United Healthcare, but it's called Change Healthcare. United Healthcare had a security breach this year, and so they shut down all connections to payments. Those are supposed to be back up running this month, but for 2 months we haven't gotten EMS monies. We could have opted to get advances on those. The money is still there. It's just not moving for security reasons. I opted not to get the advance because I felt like that was a lot more administrative function. If it doesn't start coming in soon, then we'll start talking about that. The next page is really just a statement of cash, so this will tell you what each of our funds has as far as cash goes, you can see that the ending balance is still 10.1 million, so the ending balance would be all of our cash that we have in our banks that is not dedicated to a purchase already. The last two papers are kind of important to me because these have to do with our banks. So the one that says the bank report will tell you what the ending balance for each of those banks was at the end of April. And the total of all those ending balances is the total amount of cash within our banks currently. So that's approximately $15 million. When we look at the paper behind it, that's my city bank reconciliation. So you can see that all the banks are reconciled except the main operating account. If you remember earlier this year, I said that eventually I would be coming to council to ask for permission to write off a difference that's been carried for a long time. That is the number I'm looking at right now that's highlighted. That difference is not within any month that's happened since I've been here. Since I've been here, every single month has been reconciled within that period. In order to go back and find that, we might have to go way back before we moved in this building. I don't know where it's at. So when the auditors come on site at the end of May, I'll be discussing that with them, and they're going to have a suggestion for us, and that's what I'll be bringing to you probably, well, as soon as Josh can get me on the calendar after that meeting with them.
This is one of those areas that commonly pops up in the audit where they will frequently tell us for an amount that's about this amount.
Yeah.
That it's cheaper to write it off than to spend the staff time and money to try to go figure out where that $9,000 is, because you could have to go back decades and decades, and it's probably not all in one chunk. So you might have to figure, it's a lot of forensic accounting for a very small amount of money.
And 2 years ago, when I was on the audit call with Tom, I can swear on a stack of Bibles, they told him to write that off 2 years ago. Like, something in
Was that the
very,
same, was that the same thing?
very similar amount of money that was been instructed 2 years ago on an audit to write that amount off. I mean, over a $15 million budget, if you're trying to, like,
There-
spend 2 years tracking down $9,000.
There was a write-off.
There was a write-off,
Yes, but
yeah.
it wasn't this money.
It wasn't recorded that I can find. It was approved to be recorded, but I can't find that it was done.
Yeah, we don't know that that entry was actually made into the books, so we'll be
Okay.
we'll be
'cause, yeah, it was
cleaning up
legislation.
a couple
I
of
know.
problems.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
found the legislation. I know that
Okay.
you guys did address a part of this. It was a little bit lower than this, but it was actually in the opposite direction. If you look at that last sheet, the bank balance adjusted amount is 15.043, and the book balance, which is my balance in our accounting system, is 15.034. That indicates to me that we have revenues that were not recorded. So that's an easier thing to talk about than,
$1,000 that someone spent a week.
right, than having revenue that's
Right.
gone, like expenses that weren't recorded, because that could indicate that there was revenue that came in that didn't make it into the bank. So we're actually on the good side of making an adjustment, if, in my opinion.
A couple other things, because Kim won't toot her own horn, I will. If you go back to the revenue report, I do want to point out at the very bottom of the first page, you'll see a line there for investment income. One of the first things that Kim did when she came aboard was to figure out where to park our money so that it would earn some interest. In fairness to staff that were here before, the interest rate environment wasn't all that great, over the last couple of decades, but now that that environment has changed, we've had the opportunity to make more educated investments. Kim took the initiative to do that. And you'll see on this report that the year-to-date revenue there is just over $200,000. So she's already paid for herself. Congratulations, Kim. And we're on track to do pretty well this year in terms of investment income. Later on in this meeting, I'm going to be sharing some details with you about our compensation philosophy and compensation strategy, which involves going more toward a merit pay system. This is the kind of initiative that I'm seeking to reward in that kind of policy conversation. So we'll get to that later in the meeting, but I do want to thank Kim for all her initiative to be the best steward of our taxpayer dollars that she can be. And one other quick note, in keeping track of the quarterly income taxes, we're basically right on track with budget for the year. So we've collected about 33% of what we expect to at this point in the year, and we're about a third of the way through the year as well. So if there are material changes there, we'll bring those to you, but looking okay on the revenue side. Any questions for Kim?
One just anecdotal question. Does SSI have the ability to, they don't have the ability to do roll-up reporting, so instead of reporting out like account by account, to where it could just be like object within department?
Yeah, I can run reports however you want to see them.
Okay, and I guess that's a question I'd have for my fellow members of council. So this report here, it's listing out every general ledger line item that we have in the city. If you see each section of that, it's the fund, it's a department, help me with the third section, fund, department.
And that, so what we see here, we're talking the expense report.
Yeah, just like what our account structures are.
So those are the categories of our expenditures. So when you guys pass your appropriations, we do personnel versus other. So you would see personal services, that's the personnel budget, and then every other line under that
Right.
would be what you've approved for other expenditures within
So-
that fund and department.
Okay. Would it be more helpful for us to see like the department, like police or public works or city administration, finance, HR, and then all of those, like the 5 lines kind of grouped together to where it's just on one line there? That would condense this report down to like
3 pages
a
instead of
third.
6.
Would that be helpful for?
Using layman's language is helpful too.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just really what you're trying to get is just an overall, like, how much did this department spend on personnel services? And, I mean, that's where we kind of talk about not getting into the weeds, right? And being too detailed in these types of meetings as policy setting. For me, looking at every individual general ledger account, that's way too much in the weeds. I trust Josh, I trust Kim, like, you're gonna allocate the money the way that it needs to go into the right GL accounts. We really, as councils and most elected officials, look at the bigger picture, like, how much is the police spending on personnel? How much are they spending on operating?
So probably would be helpful to break it, to summarize it in a way that matches how you're approving appropriations.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
We can
please.
definitely do that.
Okay.
And hopefully that makes it easier for you.
Well, to me, it's just run this
Push a
report,
button.
make sure it's pulled what I wanted.
But remember, at the beginning, it was hand keying a bunch of green bar paper.
Oh,
So we've
this
come a long way.
Yeah, this is way better than what we had before.
Right. Thank you, Kim.
My psychiatrist and psychologist will thank you.
Keep it simple.
Yes.
Any other questions for Kim on our finance updates? All right. Well, thank you, Kim.
You're welcome.
And we'll go back to the city manager.
So we'll go to Ms. Holt in Community Development for her report. And let me know when to switch slides. Oh, you've got the clicker. I gave you that. Man, it's been a day. Can you pull that too? Yeah, there you
Yes,
go.
yes.
Thank you.
Good evening, residents and city council. I'll give you a little bit of an update of what our department has been doing for the past few months. All right. So this month, we will have both of our board, Planning Commission and BZA will meet. There'll be one case on each of their agendas. We have been in the community this month. We went to Stebbins Career Fair. You can see us with a few members from the other departments, us being me, but there. But we had a great time meeting students and really educating them about public service and the possibilities of staying and working with the city of Riverside. We also went to, and it is we, there was me and Taryn, and a few of you up there on the dais at the Children's Water Festival, working with 1,200 fourth graders, and a few of them were from Mad River schools, and attending the luncheon. What's not on here is that Lori went to a brownfield training in Columbus this week, and Rob attended a hazard mitigation training as well. So we also have some few changes to our personnel. We have a new development tech who was at the Water Festival. That's Taryn Smith. You'll see her around, I'm sure. And our spring intern is wrapping up, and you'll see a presentation from her later. Mara, she did a wonderful job, and you've seen some of her work with the master fee schedule and some of the things that she's designed. But her research on complete streets, and what that could do for our community is what you'll see later. We also have a wonderful volunteer who has been scanning some of our documents from the 90s that we had to comb through when a resident would ask about a permit from back in those days. So we thank Katarina very much for that. And our code enforcement application for our second code enforcement officer closes on the 10th, which is tomorrow. One thing that we have been waiting for since we joined this program in 2019 is for an application to get approved. And with Lori's diligence, we had one with our partners at MSD. They were awarded $100,000 for the new administrative building that they're building in our community on Springfield Street. And the next step is for us to enter a agreement with Montgomery County for the distribution of those funds. We will also need to enter agreement with MSD itself, but we're not at that stage yet. And we will require a resolution for those development agreements. Any questions before I move on? Okay. Okay. And something I know a lot of you are very curious about is where are we at with our zoning code update? We did pass, as you know, our comprehensive plan, and now the next step is updating our code so that it serves our community better and our businesses. So we reached out to 4 firms seeking proposals and drafted a scope of work that was in 2 phases. The first one is determining what type of code would work best for our community. Is it the code that has the different zoning districts, known as a Euclidean code? Is it a form-based code that some of the other districts are going, where it's mostly the design of the structures, not strictly the use? Or is it some hybrid in between? So that will be the first task of any of these firms. The second one is, okay, now we've decided the type of code we want to work with. Now draft that for us with the help of a steering committee and input from our residents. And after talking with each of those firms and reviewing those proposals based on those 5 criteria, we scored them. Okay. And that is how it came out. We did look at also pricing from each of those. That included their work and also the work of legal. We do not want to overwhelm Jim as he just comes into our team. So we looked at that as their project team experience as well. So moving on, looking at the proposals, the pricing and all that, we as staff would recommend ZoneCo, because this firm has worked with adjacent communities, that's City of Dayton, Fairborn, for example. They have a proposal that is very proactive. They have experience with both hybrid, form-based codes, images that they can put into the code. I think that is good when you can see a code, but if you can see a visual representation of what that code is trying to put forth into the community and represent, I think that's great for anybody trying to dig into a zoning code. They also have a background that can position Riverside to be in a better place competitive. We're on 35 and some other transits that already put us in a good position, but how do we get to the next step? And I think they can help us get there. Their owner is an attorney himself, and he has others on his team, and they have people who have worked with communities, like I said, like us, and have a really good engagement plan, so we would recommend them as the lowest and best. Any questions before I move on?
And is ZoneCo the group out of Cincinnati?
They are, yes.
I'm doing a very quick search because I was very familiar with McBride and Clarion. But I'm now seeing that ZoneCo worked on the Ohio Zoning Atlas as part of the National Zoning Atlas project. So that's in addition to working with communities nearby, that's a tremendously
Yes.
prestigious and important work that they've done nationally. So that's, Zach might be the numbers geek, I'm the maps geek. So when Naya is speaking, I'm listening intently. And if this is what Naya thinks, I'm I'm very excited to hear what else they can do
Yeah.
for us.
So there was, and I have worked with the other firm that you just mentioned before, and I think very highly of them, but there was a large price gap there.
Yes, and they've worked with several communities in the region as
Yes.
well.
Mhm. All of them have. But for this particular project, there was some that were just immediately, like we touched borders with them.
All right.
So that's all I have. If there's no
Questions for Naya?
I don't have a question, I have a comment. We need to thank her for her outreach with the water project down at UD. She was an integral part in planning and executing, and thank you for representing us so well. And thank you for all you do.
Another example of quality
Oh,
initiative.
stop it.
Thank you, Naya.
Thank you, Naya.
All right, for the administration report, I will be pretty brief. I know we have a number of other things on the agenda. At this point, I mostly just wanted to bring to your attention and recognize the efforts of Chief Mark Miller, who's not with us this evening, and our HR manager, April Davis, as well as our legal counsel, Mr. Steve McHugh, that we've used for personnel services. They were the team that represented the administration going into our fire contract. I'm pleased to report to you that that contract negotiation lasted all of 6 hours. So the unions agreed to the major terms of the contract. I'll provide that to you, and I'll have that listed on the June agenda, the first meeting in June for ratification. If anything pops up in the meantime about that, just let me know. But I did want to extend my gratitude to our team as well as to the firefighters. I think everybody really approached that in good faith. We were pretty open, and we got the things resolved that we needed to resolve, and it was a very good process overall. So that's all I have on the administration side.
All right, let's jump into our many work session items.
All right, so first up, I'd like to introduce Ms. Kristen Byrice, who is the Voter Advocacy Liaison and Speaker for Rank the Vote? Rank the Vote. And I will go ahead and pull up your presentation here as well. Ranked choice voting, as you'll recall, we touched on this very briefly, I think at the last meeting or last work session, was a topic that had been discussed at charter review. And so Ms. Byrice will provide us with an overview of that topic. Take it away.
Thank you very much. Hello, council. Thank you for having me here tonight. I appreciate the opportunity to share information with you on ranked choice voting. I'm Kristen Byrice, and I am a volunteer with Rank the Vote Ohio. I have one of the founding members of the organization. I've been working with this organization since 2020 when we started it. Rank the Vote Ohio is a nonpartisan, nonprofit, grassroots organization fighting to implement ranked choice voting for the state of Ohio. We believe it to be the next major step in the list of reforms we need in Ohio, and I hope that you'll consider joining us in making that happen.
You might have to try to point it.
There it
this
is.
way. There we go.
Okay. Thomas Jefferson said that the living should not be ruled by the dead, and pushed for ways to reform and fix our Constitution to reflect the advancement of society and change over time. We have fixed and upgraded so much since then, but our voting system remains woefully behind that curve. If we want to reflect a better understanding of the world, we need a new system that better reflects us. Oops, oh, quick. All right. So for example, one of the problems that we have right now is that in 2000, and this happens more often than you'd like to think in local levels and at the state level too for representatives, 2000 in the US presidential election in Florida, we had Bush, Gore, and Nader all running. Since 1968, there have been 2 times when the president won with less than 50% of the vote. First time was Bush, Clinton, and Perot in 1992. In 2000, Nader was demonized for choosing to run, predicting this impact. Nader's supporters were vilified for wasting their votes. This spoiler effect creates a strong bias against competition in our elections. Another example of the problem here is Trump versus Clinton in 2016. 45% of our country did not vote at all. Many of the reasons are, no one represents me. Nothing will change. I don't like my candidates. I don't have time. And the system is too broken anyway. I have been personally involved in getting out the vote efforts across the state of Ohio since 2000 as well. And when I talk to voters, there are three in particular that come up all the time. Nothing will change. The system is too broken. And no one represents me. This is not bringing out the voters. We want to hear what the voters have to say. This deters people from coming out to vote. 45% did not vote in 2016. Okay. So the effect on our elections. One of the biggest effects on our elections is that incumbents win 90% of the time. It's the greatest factor in someone getting reelected, mostly because of electability, name recognition, and voters not wanting a chance losing the person they like over the other. People don't want to waste a vote for someone they think will just lose. So fear pushes people to vote against who they are scared of instead of voting for the person that they would like to see in office representing them. I will get it one of these days. The voting system is the problem. You can see from this example here on the right, this is just 2024, this year, we had a primary election in the 2nd District of Ohio, and the winner of that primary election won by 25%. Nowhere near 50%, nowhere near the majority of voters wanted that person to be in office. So our current system, two-party candidates are considered spoilers or wasted votes when we have non-mainstream candidates running. They're the spoiler effect, they're wasted votes. Candidates do not need a majority right now of 50% to win an election. Right now, you can win with 25%, 35%. We have state representatives that have been elected at the State House for 35 and 45%. We have city council members sometimes that have been elected with 25 and 35% because so many people were running for office. With ranked choice voting, you would be required to have 50% or more than 50% to win. When you allow people to have less than 50% a majority vote, it pushes voters to convince themselves not to vote for the candidates they actually want because they aren't electable enough. It prevents us from listening to others or understanding issues when the winning strategy is to demonize other opponents. It silences our voices. The system itself is what needs to change. We need to create an incentive structure that makes us want to understand others. The issue we face and demands a majority support in the direction we want to go. So what would that look like? Instead of choosing one candidate, we could have ranking your choices and having a majority, knowing what the people actually want, knowing the majority support for each candidate. So ranked choice voting is a simple upgrade to the way we vote right now. When we vote right now, as you can see right there, you pick one. Ballots list the candidates and the voter is only permitted to select one option. But with ranked choice voting, you rank your choices, first, second, third, and so on. If your first choice doesn't win, your vote shifts to your second. If you don't win then, it shifts to your third. This way, your voice is always heard, your vote will never be wasted, and the spoiler never happens again. So how do we choose a winner? The only way to win in ranked choice voting is to have a majority vote. You have to have over 50% in order to win a ranked choice voting election. And this happens either right away or you have an instant runoff. So this is also called, why ranked choice voting is also called instant runoff voting as well. So if the majority of the votes aren't received in that first round right away, we go to instant runoff. So here's an example of how that would work. So we have 5 candidates, and we vote. And as you can see from the sample, 55% went to the orange candidate, and the orange candidate would win. Voting is over. That election is finished. That decision has been made. More than 50% of the voters said, I want that candidate. We're done. Now, what happens if that's not the case? So if there isn't a majority in the first round, then we will start that instant runoff. So notice on this one, the orange candidate has 35, that is the most. We would like to see what the majority of people want, so we're going to keep going. And what's going to happen is the lowest percentage would be knocked out of the race because they are the ones that are least approved by the voters. Therefore, those people who voted for the turquoise candidate, their votes are then redistributed to their second choice on the yellow, purple, blue, or orange candidate, whichever one they chose second. And as you can see, we still don't have a majority. So what happens? We continue to go on. Now we have 14% on the lowest end. The votes from last place, again, are redistributed. And again, we still don't have a majority, so we redistribute one more time here, round 4, and all those votes are distributed to the blue and the orange until we get over 50% of the vote for one candidate. And you'll notice the blue candidate win, even though the orange candidate was up front first in that first round, it's the blue candidate that wins who has the most majority vote and the most support of those who voted to win this race. We know who the majority of people wanted.
Pardon me, I apologize. I had a quick question. I don't want to forget to ask it.
Yeah.
Is this the majority of first place votes or majority of votes total when you continue to narrow it down?
As each one goes, second choice for everybody would move on to their second choice, third choice, fourth choice, depending on where they are in that. So it's a little bit like each round goes. So you do round 1, and we see where there's votes spread out for their second choice. Only the people in the turquoise for that round 1 would have their votes redistributed. And then in vote 2, those people who voted for yellow first,
Yes,
their
okay.
votes would be redistributed.
Okay, so I see how it cascades now. Thank you.
And then it cascades into, I like that word, into finally we move all the votes to second, third, fourth choice, depending on when their candidate was knocked out of the race.
Thank you for not using animals. Every YouTube video I have found used animals for this.
Oh, I don't want to make you an animal. Candidates are not animals.
The state of
I mean-
Maine, Alaska, a lot of places had no problem on their state board of elections pages just using well, here's the turtle. The turtle doesn't want to lose.
Yeah.
But then there's the weasel. The weasel's not going to win either, right? But I think the colors work better.
Color coding
Me.
works. Good to know. Thanks for that note. We'll take
Pardon my
that and
interruption.
continue.
You did it in like a street.
So since voters ranked their candidates, their voices were heard, and their vote was never wasted. Everybody's vote was counted. We have a winner, and like I said, it's not the person that you would have expected after that first round. Sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. It really depends on the majority of vote. We're listening to the voters. So it may be the same person who started. It may not, depending on what happens. So think about that election in 2007 where we had Bush, Gore, and Nader. So, and according to the New York Times, on February 24th in 2004, they published an article that looked at exit polls for Nader voters. So if Nader had not been in the race, or if we'd had ranked choice voting and their second choices could have been used, the exit polls for Nader said 45% preferred Gore, 27% preferred Bush, and 28% would not have voted. So the exit poll showed that Nader, not running, nearly half of his supporters would have voted for Gore. So majority of voters preferred Gore over Bush, but he loses because Nader ran, causing that spoiler effect. This thus thwarting the will of all the voters who would have preferred otherwise, or the discouraging of new. So what's the problem here? Is it the thwarting of the will of voters, or is it discouraging of new voices from running? Which one is the problem? If you ask me, it's both. So what does this new style do for the discourse that we see all the way from presidential election down to city elections? There is discourse in a lot of elections these days. So there's a new culture of civil campaigning with ranked choice voting. So one thing we lose is the hate campaign. If you want to be someone's second choice, you need to be liked. So in states that adopted ranked choice voting, and cities that have adopted ranked choice voting, we see a shift to civil campaigning. Campaign opponents make ads and canvass with each other. You want people to believe in your message, so you need to persuade and not scare. Candidates must reach out to as many voters as possible, including their opponents' voters. It avoids negative advertising, which promotes positive campaign styles, and not just to base voters for that candidate. They have to reach across to every voter, regardless of what their base vote would be. Now, if you look at this on the city level, this has been happening in Minneapolis for a long time. They have had ranked choice voting. And the mayor of Minneapolis, former mayor Betsy Hodges, participated in ranked choice voting in her election, and this is what she had to say. There was relatively little elbowing and attacking because every candidate wanted to be the second choice of their opponent's supporters. So we see that even at the city level. Thanks. All right. So with the return,
I got you.
There he is, thanks. With the return to civil campaigning, we get a return to policy. By focusing on policy, citizens will be exposed to the vast array of political discourse. Ranked choice voting allows for voters to choose candidates from the entire political spectrum. Knowing that these candidates are viable options encourages people to learn more about them, and it reduces the polarization we see thanks to the current voting system that only allows voters to select yes or no. For example, in national campaigns, 80% of the country wants Medicare for all. 60% of the country wants universal basic income. How often do we hear that in an election? It's not being talked about so often because it's more about who should you not vote for? You should vote for me, not them. We have those hate campaigns. We aren't talking about policy. We would talk more about policy, and especially the things that more people are interested in these campaigns. We also see increased turnout with ranked choice voting. So voter turnout goes up. There's a 10% increase in turnout. I did not mean to do that. I hit an extra button, I'm sorry.
Hang on a second. There we go.
There we go. There's a 10%, you see a 10% increase in turnout. In an expansive study done in the University of Missouri in 2016, the study shows that the adoption of ranked choice voting, 87% of voters ranked multiple candidates. 61% ranked all candidates. You don't have to rank more than one if you don't want to. But we see people actually doing this. In New York City, the first time they used it for their local elections, they also had the same response. Voters, 80-something%, ranked multiple candidates. And people become more engaged in politics. When you make someone's vote matter, they want to use it. Political apathy exists because people don't see themselves or their thoughts reflected in the candidates, but with candidate choice, ranked choice voting, more people become engaged. There it is. This is a study also done with large cities in the country. They did 6 of the largest cities. This is 4 of them. You can also see how voter participation went up. Before is the darker color, after ranked choice voting is the lighter color. And you can see the trend of upwards participation in voting with every one of those cities after ranked choice voting was implemented. Ranked choice voting gives power back to the people by giving them back the power of their votes. We can discuss the things we care about and our visions for the future. It empowers candidates to run, and in doing so, gives voters more voice and more choice, making politics work for all of us. Now, what's the progress on ranked choice voting? Maine is the first state that implemented ranked choice voting in 2016. And Alaska followed behind in 2020. Across the U.S., our ranked choice voting is used for other elections as well. It's not as though it's an entirely new system or idea. In fact, Ohio, Ashtabula was the first city in the country to have ranked choice voting back in 1718, in the early 1900s. So it's not new. This has been around for a long time. It's just one that we have to tell people about right now. So 45 U.S. cities are using ranked choice voting across the country, 25 in 25 states. And this is according to fairvote.org. They do a lot of research on this. If you ever want to know anything about ranked choice voting, they have a lot of studies and information on it. Across the world, ranked choice voting is used as well, not just in the United States, but other countries have used it, some for over a century. India is particularly interesting because they have 16 different parties. They permit the full breadth of the political spectrum to be on display, talking and discussing ideas. Organizations use it too. If you want someone who will guide your company forward with the desires of the company in mind, they have to be voted in by the majority of the company. So American Psychological Association, American Political Science Association, now they all use ranked choice voting at their leadership levels. Colleges and universities also use it at leadership levels to vote in their leaders across the country as well. As you can see, Harvard, MIT, some very well-known names up there. At Rank the Vote Ohio, we have endorsements for ranked choice voting across the state as well. You can see the political spectrum is represented there. We have quite a bit of support from political parties. We also have organizations such as Cleveland Votes and Ohio Move to Amend and Veterans for All Voters. We have lots of support across the state of Ohio. And we are here to support cities in working on ranked choice voting. We educate voters. We connect the city leaders with support to writing language for the policy. We'll connect you to the right people. We connect to national organizations that can advise on how best to move forward with ranked choice voting and provide resources from the other places in the country. We have speakers like me who can come and educate people on ranked choice voting, and we have educational materials that we can share and allow people to use as well. Our plan is we are leading the RCV movement across Ohio. We are the ones driving this effort right now, and we are doing a lot of work to do so. We spread the message with and phone banking. We have monthly meetings with citizens of the state of Ohio talking about ranked choice voting, educating on ranked choice voting. We have a history of ranked choice voting meeting coming up on May 20th, where we'll be talking about the history of Ashtabula and how ranked choice voting was used there in the past. And we have volunteers across the state of Ohio, in the Dayton area, in Cincinnati area, all the way across Ohio. And you can always find out more information about us at rankthevoteohio.org. Thank you for having me.
So is there any
Questions, I was going to say,
Is there
thank
any-
you, but questions, go ahead, bud.
ballot initiatives, like trying to get this on the statewide ballot for this to?
We expect at some point to have one. There are a lot of pieces that need to fall in place, but we are working towards a ballot initiative. We'd love it if our legislature took it up, and then that's a challenge in itself. Whatever way we can get ranked choice voting in the state of Ohio, we are trying to work towards that right now and educate enough people to get that to happen.
Is there any update on Senate Bill 137?
There is, at this point, as Senate Bill 137 is not being voted on. It was supposed to be voted on a few weeks ago. It was not voted on. It's not on the agenda that I have seen. It didn't go on the agenda this week to be discussed, as they did have a meeting this week, but they did not put it on the agenda. So at this point, it is stalled, and we don't know the direction that it's going to go from here.
Thank you.
Welcome.
What would you say to someone who might think, we could just do an instant runoff like they do in Louisiana, Mississippi, Georgia for statewide elections? You have to get 50% to win. Could we just do that? Or what's the counter to that, essentially?
So in states like Georgia, it's not an instant runoff. That is 2 elections that are needed to run a runoff. So there's a first election, and if there isn't 50%, then they hold a second election.
Okay.
2
Thank you for
elections
correcting
cost
the way I
money.
described it. Well,
And when you have 2 elections, that costs a lot more than doing 1 election and having it all done in 1 election.
I have to say, I wasn't at the work session, but I watched it. Having the Board of Elections, having both Mr. Owens and Mr. Busky here, both different parties, both say like, yeah, we can do this, we know the software, and please do it. So that was interesting to discover that from folks who are working and living in that every day. And this is certainly well-presented arguments about the civility point. And I think it didn't click in my head. I was asking exact questions from the time I sat down until you mentioned if we're doing this system, you can't be your opponent's enemy.
Yeah.
Because you have to present yourself as still a very viable option, even if you're not the first option.
Yeah, even if you're not the first, you want to be the second vote. So you're always vying for that. And going against each other doesn't help you do that. In fact, it works against you, and we saw that in Alaska, where it completely worked against them to not go for that second vote.
So let me ask some questions for the other folks up here just to have discussion. And our veteran attorney, Jim, on day 4, he's going to have to answer some questions too, just to make sure. Would we then go to, in theory, would we have to go to a system where a council seat, like Brenda is in seat 3. Seat 3 is up in 2.5 years. So seat 3, someone might file to run for seat 3, so there'd be people vying for that seat, because right now, we have 3 open seats in 2.5 years, and the top 3 vote getters, period, win those 3 seats. How would the mechanics of that work?
So it's like taking one seat, right? You have to have more than 50%,
Mhm.
right? Because that would be more than half of 2, right? 1 divided by 2 is 0.5.
Yes.
And then if you take 4 seats open, that would be however many votes divided by 4, and then.
To reach your threshold.
To reach your threshold.
Okay.
And then the person who's going to win has to get at least that percentage of votes. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, there's multiple ways to do it, and that's definitely one
Okay.
way to
That's-
do it, absolutely.
Simple enough. I mean, there's only 1 seat currently that is 1 for 1, and that's mayor.
You have 50%. Your math's easy. However, we decide to do a 3-seat election or a 4-seat election, it's still, like, you can still do that instant runoff,
Mhm.
and then you just pick them. I'm not that good at math. Kim might be able to help to try to figure out the math to get down to, like, what's that threshold percentage to be one of the 4 candidates that
Yeah.
will get the seat.
Yeah, that wins the seat.
And you have majority vote for that percentage.
Okay,
And the
makes
big
sense.
thing, like, we do ranked choice voting a lot in our daily lives. Think about going to a restaurant, right? Like, I'm never gonna eat something with sauerkraut, but if they ran
You're
out
from
of.
Cincinnati.
But if they ran out of fish, I might get the chicken tenders.
Yeah.
But
But
that
I'm
would be your
definitely not
first
gonna
choice.
get anything that's gonna touch sauerkraut. I'm not even gonna put it on my ballot. Or when Katie put something like a menu option that we have, like, oh, well, they have beef and they have chicken, but I'm really not gonna get that vegetarian option. I need protein. So, I mean, you rank a lot of choices in your day-to-day life. And you can't be that sauerkraut of a candidate in this situation. You want to be that like next viable option. It's better than donkeys and horses that I've seen in the other one.
Yes. Just different animals that they're picking off.
But I hope that like if this hasn't made a lot of sense, because it's hard to track. It's somewhat of a difficult concept to understand and wrap your
Actually,
head
when we're
around.
on the streets talking to people and we say you could rank your choices and your vote would count, people are like, oh, I want to do that. Like, as soon as you tell them your vote would move to the second, they're like, I could do that? And I'm like, yeah, we could. They're very excited about it when we talk to constituents about ranked choice voting.
But that would prevent us from having any sauerkrauts on campus.
Yes. And we don't mean people of German ancestry.
I like
We just-
sauerkraut.
Well, that's fine. That would be your.
That'd be your number one.
So that's your first vote.
And I know that at the work session and in the memo that Josh sent out about tonight's discussion, that we would, if we were to put this to the voters, if we were going to pass I guess would be an ordinance or resolution to move it to the ballot, I don't know which one. of them.
Resolution, I believe, to put it on the ballot, yeah.
That we would have language in it that should the state take any legal action that would prevent us from administering elections in this way, that it would nullify our decision. Could we talk a little bit about that, like how exactly that would work, or that if the state house decides to put something in the ORC that would prevent us from doing a different type of election, what does that look like for us?
Right. I can jump on that. For the proposed language for a charter review amendment that would adopt ranked choice voting in lieu of the current charter, which is just under the general laws of the state of Ohio, I have drafted, an escape hatch, so to speak, that indicates that immediately if the state law were to pass, any state law, not necessarily the Senate bill that's under consideration, but at any time if a state law passes that would withhold funding, negatively impact the municipality or have a punitive effect on the municipality, the ranked choice voting would be null and void from the charter, and it would revert immediately back to just the general laws of the state of Ohio as the charter already states right now. So there is an immediate way to nullify any reference to ranked choice voting should some negative impact, such as the Senate bill that had been going through the channels right now, if something like that were to pass, there would be an immediate reverter back to a regular election, so to speak.
Okay.
And inevitably, it's not our choice. It's our choice to present this option to our
Correct.
residents.
Correct.
And then our residents get to pick the way that they want to vote. And that's, for me, that sends a message to the state legislatures that this community said, this is the way that we want to vote. Are you going to override the will of the people because you know better, right? So I think the worst
So
that we
then
could
we
do
have a-
here
then
is
we have
give
a
the
court case for
option
home
to our
rule.
residents to be able to pick how they want to vote.
Well, then we would have, if it would pass, then we would have a court case for home rule.
Well, not with not with that text. I mean, it would just revert back.
Well, I know, but that doesn't mean that we couldn't then.
It provides evidence.
Yeah.
Provides evidence to the state, so if we chose to
Right.
take the law, or somebody chose to take it to the Supreme Court, they could nullify the state law with it.
So I think we stand to lose nothing.
Right.
I think by letting our residents pick the way that they want to vote.
Giving the voters the choice and the voice to say what they want.
And let me add, one of the other election reforms that was discussed in the charter review sessions was implementing wards. And just to contrast the two proposed reforms, I think that we've seen in neighboring communities how wards can play out to divide communities and create contention. One of the things that I think that I bring, that's important to me is the civility aspect, that we are all operating in good faith here for the betterment of the entire community. And I think that ranked choice is a way to move that issue forward, whereas I think the other recommendation takes a step backward.
Yeah, I would have to agree with Brenda there, and I know we're talking about ranked choice, but before I sat down this evening, knew a little bit about ranked choice and maybe a little skeptical because I couldn't explain it myself to someone. But hearing this and then obviously knowing Brenda's passion, and she and I have been able to talk about it a little bit, but the idea that we could be an example, the idea that we will give the voters a chance to be an example, to not only increase the electorate participation in our own community, which could use a boost.
Yeah.
I'll say that lovingly. And also set an example of the decorum that one should expect from their elected leaders. So, other questions for our guests? Because I know we have other items to get to, but this was a very, very helpful presentation for me.
I'm gonna start using this at home for when we decide dinner.
Ranked choice. Just have a note card ready. You wouldn't have a note card, you'd have something on it, you'd have an app ready.
I'll take sauerkraut.
Yeah, sauerkraut for everybody. Thank you very much for your time this evening. We really appreciate it. All right, and Mr. City Manager, we have a few more charter review, right back into the charter review suggestions.
Yeah, I put these next to
Good
each other
segue from
because I
Brenda.
figured the segue would be natural. So, coming right off the heels of that, we will get actually two ranked choice voting as part of this next discussion. Let me put this up on the screen.
What's ranked choice voting again?
Remind
You can
me
watch
what-
the YouTube.
Yeah.
No. So
See, there's this turtle.
we prepared as staff and then circulated this to council earlier prior to this meeting, but what's before you currently is a summary of corrections and other recommended and suggested changes to the charter that came out of the charter review discussions that were had earlier this year. So again, just a quick recap, there was no formal charter review committee because we didn't get the participation. However, what's in front of you is sort of the output of the discussion that came out of those meetings. So just to quickly cover these, the first few items actually are items that do not require council intervention. These are items that we can clean up administratively in the charter, and I think we intend to do that just to bring some clarity here in terms of how special meetings may be called. And there's a typo in section 2, or an incomplete sentence, I should say, in the second bullet point there, section 503E, that we will correct. The final correction that we'll make is in section 8.03, which references a director of personnel. We have a human resources manager currently, so we will make that administrative change to the title. None of these corrections require a ballot measure or council approval because they don't really pertain, they don't change the spirit or meaning of any of the provisions. It's cleanup, housekeeping stuff. As far as items that do require council approval to put on the ballot so that the voters can determine what direction to move the charter in, we have 8 items here. I thought I would just briefly summarize each of these and then look for some consensus on council as to whether they are of interest. So just to be clear, we're not voting on these this evening. If you are interested in this, we will prepare the resolutions and bring them to the next business meeting in June so that you can deliberate and vote on them further at that point in time. The first item here, we're going to go in section order through the charter. So the first item is section 4.01, which concerns at-large council members. This goes to Councilmember Fry's point that she just made as far as discussion coming up during the meeting about moving more toward a ward system rather than at-large elections. So there was no proposed language that was developed regarding this initiative because the general consensus of the meeting was that participants in the meeting were, I would say, more against this than for it, so staff didn't prepare any language. This is one of those areas, there are a couple of these where I don't intend to provide you with a staff recommendation because from my perspective as your administrator, we're here to do whatever you'd like. We're going to carry out the will of the council however that happens. This is sort of a pure policy question about how you want to arrange how your seats are elected. There's not a good or bad here. And so for the purposes of this conversation, if there is interest in council wanting to put an item like this on the ballot, we will do it, but I thought I'd open it up for a discussion on that point, if any.
Brenda, I think, said it very, very well. And I won't point to any other communities that may or may not be neighboring communities or may not have some more challenges. But I believe by the sheer nature of something like this, I don't know how we would avoid more conflict and division over anything as large as a new development or as small as a stop sign replacement on why things got done where. And it must have been because Zach lives on his street versus Mike lives on his street. And I also don't want people to feel like they can only get reelected if they do things, I won't say favors, but if they do stuff for their own ward, their own neighborhood.
Right now, this is the way I see it. Right now, we work for every one of us.
Yeah, we answer
work
all
for
of them.
25,000 constituents. And if we go to wards, now you're going to have, instead of working for 25,000, in theory, you're working for whatever the number of people are
Maybe a
in
couple
your ward.
thousand.
And let me put a little bit of historical data on this, since I was on the conditions of merger. This was discussed in depth during the conditions of merger, and when we were writing out how we were going to put this together, and it was discussed. So this was back in 1992. And we had seen how Dayton had wards and other communities had wards, and what we saw was it negatively impacted their community. And what we wanted to see when we were putting that together was that we become more of a community, not more islandy. And so my thing is, wards would make us more islandy than we already are, and I don't think we want to do that. And so, just so people understand, years ago when we were starting the city, this was discussed in depth, and I'm sure the Charter Commission discussed it too on how they wanted to do it, and it was decided that we would do everybody would be at large, and we would separate it by you would have two people elected plus the mayor at their intervals, and then you have the 4 elected at their intervals, and that would keep it, and everybody would be at large, and that's some historical data to go with this.
Because back before some of you even born, the very serious division between the North and the South. And as a school board member, we were very active in the 80s and the early, 70s and early 80s, and combined the schools to bring the kids together at a younger age, rather than, because it used to be like Mad River Junior High and Spinning Hill Junior High, and the kids never, the young people, I should say, never got together until they were in the 9th or 10th grade at Stebbins. So that culture had been going on for years. And so what the school district combined and made in the reorganization and closing some buildings, to try to bring the young people together to try to unite this community. And I really can't say from how successful we've been, but it's better than it used to be. And we used to have a whole lot of, you're from over there, whichever way you were speaking. And I think some people who are in this room who live that life understand what I'm saying, that it was a very different, you're from the north side or you're from the south side, and whichever, you didn't matter. So I think wards was like Mike has said very eloquently, why we went to try to bring the community in the, 7 parcels, more unified than divided.
That sounds like we're on the same page.
So I think that one goes down the tube.
So, yeah, I'm not hearing a whole lot of appetite for that one.
This next one, the mayor, I don't think.
I just thought we should just,
Speaking of things we don't like, let's get to the mayor.
Can we just get rid of them
Let's
altogether?
just, isn't it
So-
enough? It's been enough.
Similar concept here. This is a proposed charter change that would convert the mayor's role from a full voting member of council into a tiebreaker-only role. Again, not an area where I feel like it's appropriate for staff to weigh in. It really is how you all want to run and govern yourselves and to position the mayor in terms of the overall governing body context. But
I think it's
Two
working
seats that
just
way.
fine.
I think
I
the
wouldn't
way
go that
we're,
far, but-
we're working is great, because that also would say that the mayor doesn't have a voice and wouldn't be allowed to have an opinion on, or involved in any of the discussions. Basically, he would just run the meetings.
Or let him
It
off
would-
the hook.
it would be-
whatever.
Or it would let him off the hook and not, you know.
We're a city manager form of government, not a strong mayor form of government.
Exactly.
He's not
And-
gonna veto something,
and-
so.
and
this
I could,
is-
though.
I think it's, that's a terrible
The,
idea.
the city manager, or in a city manager form of a government, having a mayor vote like this would just be, I don't think I've ever seen a city do it.
Oh, I do. I know of one very close to us
Uh,
that does it this way.
A city manager form, not a strong, weak.
Yes.
mayor?
Huber Heights.
local government comes in many flavors,
Yeah.
so.
'Cause
That's
it's-
weird.
It's
Yeah.
because they can set their own rules.
They set their own rules.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way they started it, that's the way they run it. It works for them, but it just doesn't work for us.
They are getting a buck.
I value having the seventh member of the council contributing to the discussion, and I
And
would
the
hate,
vote.
I would hate to lose that.
All right, not
Maybe if we
hearing,
move that forward,
not
we'll
hearing
get
a whole lot of
our own
appetite
Another one goes down the
for
tube.
that one either. We'll keep
All right.
moving. Okay, this one is fairly straightforward. Section 503A describes how we will provide notice of meetings. This is something that is, more and more communities are changing in order to remove requirements to publish in newspapers of general circulation. So the proposed changes are outlined here for you. We recommend that you do adopt or adopt a resolution to put this on the ballot because it would streamline some of the administrative processes that we run into.
Here, here.
I agree.
And this is all in line with Ohio Revised Code as well.
Correct.
Okay.
Next, under the section for the manager, this has to do with the intersection between how procurement is described in the charter and also our procurement ordinance. The overall recommendation here is to slightly modify the language so that we basically have the charter reference the procurement ordinance to avoid any confusion about when contracts are or are not effective and prevents some overlap between those two sections. I recommend that you move forward with this one, if only because it's more difficult to change the charter as procurement laws and requirements continue to evolve as the decades go on. It's easier just to bake a charter provision in that says, look at the administrative code and refer to that instead.
Mr. Miller
Sounds
thinks
good.
it's okay, I'm okay with that.
All
I
right?
do.
Ohio procurement policy.
Next, the operation of boards and commissions. So there was a suggestion, and again, there's not any proposed language here. This is another situation where there was a suggestion to bake what amounts to a training requirement into the city charter for boards and commissions. I would say that the general tenor of the meeting was that there was not a lot of energy to include that in the charter. Again, this is something that's probably best addressed in the actual bylaws of the boards and commissions themselves. So we would recommend you take no action on this issue unless it's critically important to you.
It'd be like changing our constitution to say, unless you wear a green hat, you're not allowed to vote, that's ridiculous. I think doing it the way we do it now is fine.
All right, we'll go to, yeah, I'm getting the cues. All right, so we'll go to number 6, which is also.
You're getting better at that.
To do, hey, that's a couple years in. You get your training wheels off, right? So this also has to do with revisions to the Planning Commission and Board of Zoning Appeals sections. There was a suggestion made at the meeting that we modify the charter so that a certain number of non-residents could serve on these boards and commissions, in part as a way of widening the pool of applicants who may be interested and available and willing to serve, and in part to try to attract more specialized professional expertise into some of those boards and commissions. Should folks that have that expertise be unable, and they live in Riverside, be unable to serve. The issue right now is the charter basically requires residency in the city in order to serve, or that you be an elector of the city in order to serve on a board or commission. Again, this is something we would recommend at least go out to the voters for approval, just so that folks in our community can weigh in on it. I've certainly seen it work with some success in other places, and to the extent that it allows a third set of eyes to help weigh in on a conversation, we would not structure this, and I think the proposed language is structured to, you don't want to be in a situation where others are coming in to control your direction as a community, which is why the number of folks that could come in from the outside would be limited in this context.
I would assume it would go without saying, but I just want to make sure if this is something that we as a group of 7 want to do, endorse enough to put in front of the voters that membership on Planning Commission and BZA, those folks are still subject to things like conflict of interest, rules or notices, I should say, and those should be disclosed no matter what, whether you're a resident of our city or if this becomes a referendum that's passed, they would still be subject to all those things. Because I'm just thinking about what an average citizen who hears this and maybe hears it in a different tone or delivery, they could easily say, oh, well, they're going to let XYZ developer on the board, and then he or she's going to take all the things they want. It couldn't happen like that anyway. Am I safe to say that, or?
Yes, whether an elected official, an appointed commission board member, any planning commission or board of zoning appeals member, regardless of residency, is subject to Chapter 102 of the Ohio ethics laws. So they would be subject to declaring conflicts of interest, abstention, et cetera. So all those same rules do apply.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that was at least something that was brought up as we talked about essentially letting non-residents decide on city issues. But that's kind of what I wanted to figure out.
And if I could add 2 cents to this, earlier this year, this body did adopt a more formalized process for how we appoint or how you appoint members to those boards. So there will be more guardrails for anybody coming in.
Any other general discussion items about this?
Does the charter limit the number of people on the BZA or the planning commission?
So currently, the charter specifically indicates each commission has 5 members. So planning commission and BZA, per the charter, have 5 spots
Okay.
on each body. So the proposed language pursuant to the feedback from the community meetings that were had on this matter was to put a cap so that less than 50% of the 5-person makeup of each body, so no more than 2, would be eligible seats for non-residents should they meet the requirements set forth in each body's bylaw or other resolution. We did not want to propose that in the charter to make those requirements harder and more difficult to change, and just refer back to the bylaws for each body.
Right. So, well, what I was thinking was that I like the limit of 2, but my thought was that if we were going to do that you raise the number to 7 on each of those.
I was going to say, so many of the meetings, not, all 5 aren't there.
Right.
So you could get in a position where the 2 outsiders.
Are
with the-
making quorum.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a good idea at all. So, and I don't know, we have trouble enough getting 5, so I don't know how we think we
No,
can get 7.
and I agree with that, but my thing, if we're going to,
Change it, we could go to a bigger number.
but keep the number of outside to a limited to 2, not limited to less than the majority. Unless we're going to put something in, they're going to put something in their bylaws or rules that say, if the outside,
You can't tell them to do that,
Well, could you change the bylaws that determine what a quorum is, that the two non-residents
Don't count towards the
don't-
quorum?
Well,
Well, that's a question.
It's
Is
a
that
reasonable.
would be a
that's
safeguard against
Well,
that
that's kind of
happening.
where I was
Yeah.
going to, is that if, you know, if the quorum isn't, it has to be a quorum of residents. It can't be a quorum including
Our subject matter experts.
this, yeah.
I don't know, but from attending meetings or watching them online often, I just think that
Well, that's why I like the
There-
idea of raising the number to 7 for each of those commissions and
I just think
still
we're
limiting
making
it to
their job
2.
harder.
I don't know.
well,
I think we make their job harder to get anything done when we put more gates on what happens. I don't know that what we're doing
Well,
is
you
working
understand
that
my
successfully
concern.
at
I've
this
got you.
point.
Brenda, you were going to say something?
I think, given the position that we're in with recruiting members to these boards, I think we're not gaining a whole lot by adding 2, but then increasing the total number by 2. Your point is well taken. I think that if we could just tweak the quorum requirement, we could get the benefit of, knowing that when we're conducting a meeting, we have the input of the residents, and without putting an undue burden on filling that commission.
And I think we could handle that through bylaws. And the other thing, too, that just to remind everybody is, actually, Naya made an excellent point a couple minutes ago, which is that even though those folks may not have residency in Riverside, you will have reviewed, vetted, and approved them and appointed them to these boards. So I think it's also fair that you all have the expectation that they, are going to carry out the vision that you've articulated for the community. And if they don't, you have powers to remove and find somebody else, too. So you're not trapped into a situation where you have an outsider that's going to go rogue and make all kinds of decisions. There are mechanisms already in place to help control that. So I'm hearing basically leave this one, bring it in a resolution, and that if the voters pass it, we will deal with quorum issues as a function of bylaws.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay. We will handle it that way. 2 more. Okay, this is, number 7 is section 1003, which is what we just had a presentation on in terms of ranked choice voting. So Mr. Miller has drafted some proposed language here. And at this point, this is another one where I will not give you a formal recommendation from staff, given that it's sort of integral to how to run elections in the community.
Can we talk about this later?
We have to get this soon, right?
Well, if it,
August goes on the ballot, you have to have it in August. These would all have to be
we got, how many meetings do we have in
formally-
June?
We have time.
We have 3 meetings in June, 2 meetings and a work session. I can table this to take to the next work session, but then you would need to vote either at the second June meeting or the
Yeah, I
first
just want to make sure we're
meeting
aware of the timing.
in July.
That's- I
Yeah,
don't-
you do have time. It's not make or break tonight.
Is there anybody here who needs more information on?
Well, I just need to understand it better.
Yeah, we heard it for the first time, many of us
Yeah.
tonight, so I think it's appropriate to give it a little bit of time. But again,
I'm not saying I'm against it, I just want to know that I understand it better and what I am saying okay to.
Okay. Is there something that we should have?
Yeah,
more
can we help?
Like information, like is there should we have them back or?
No, I can absorb everything she said and I will go online. I do
Okay.
know how to do that.
Okay.
I know you don't have much confidence in
I
that.
trust you.
All right.
If we were bringing this back, I
So
said
what timetable would we be looking at?
I will bring it back at the next work session, which would be June 13th, off the top of my head.
7:13.
And then we would, at that point in time, if we still need to discuss, we can make time at either a regular meeting or call another meeting. But there would be 2 business meetings, the June 20th meeting where you could adopt a resolution, or the July meeting, which is later in the month in July.
Okay.
So, but
yeah,
I'll.
as long as there's time, I don't want to put it on the side and then we miss.
Right.
you know.
That was only my concern.
Yep.
Okay,
All right, final item is 1304. And this is mostly just cleanup for charter review itself. So given that the current charter requires charter review every 5 years, and that council it's in council's prerogative to propose a charter change at any time, we felt, or there was discussion at the meeting, and I think staff agree, that it may make some sense to extend the formal charter review period from 5 to 10 years, just as a way of giving charter changes more time, and also reducing the number of folks appointed to Charter Review Commission from 9 to 7. 7 is in line with the governing body currently anyway, so there's more consistency there. It's a little bit less of a burden to go identify additional volunteers for the next Charter Review Commission. So we would recommend putting it on the ballot for the community to weigh in as well.
No problem.
I disagree with changing it to 10 years. I think that's an awfully long time. I think that what we did this year was valid, useful, that even if we can't put together, a large group, I still think it's valuable to look at the charter every 5 years.
Okay. So what I've heard is that there's some interest in a resolution, so we will prep that and then have that before you for further deliberation and action. And that wraps up the charter review. I didn't know if there were any other comments, questions, concerns from council about charter review-related items that were not discussed on these sheets of paper. And I believe we have some folks who are on charter review with us this evening. If you're within your rights to invite them to weigh in as well.
I think we should go ahead and bring the resolution forward on the ranked choice voting also.
I do too.
And then we vote on it at that time. We're either going to send it on or we're not going to send it on. We've got, we've got a lot of information here to digest. We can go online and find it, and we should be able to get all our homework done by the next time we have a meeting, because we don't have a meeting next week. We don't have a meeting until the first week in June, and that way we can get all this taken care of, and we're not kicking the can down the road. So, I mean, if you need us to vote on that tonight, I will. I can make that motion, but
Well, I mean,
I'd
we're.
just like to move forward.
Right. So I'm hearing more say move something forward than not. And there are more opportunities to continue the conversation as well. So at this point, let's just recap this list, or the list that we just showed. What I heard is move. At this point, I'm prepared to bring you resolutions on number 3. Number 3, which is notice in a paper of general circulation. That's this one. We'll also prep a resolution on procurement with the manager. One for number 6, which is the planning and BZA non-resident. And at this point then, I'm also hearing bring number 7, and we can debate it at a regular meeting, and bring number 8, and we'll do the same thing. And then if we need more time as a function of that debate in a regular meeting, or we need to revote on things after we have a few more meetings left where that conversation can continue.
That would be better, yeah.
I think that way we've got those resolutions in place, and we don't, and if we think we need to,
If we need to
have
take more
more
time.
discussion time, then we
We
can.
can.
well, you
do
can
it
always,
then.
if you're not agreeing, so you can always vote to
Yeah.
not support it.
Yeah.
I did want to take Josh's cue, and I know we have a few members of the public of our city who are here tonight that were working on the charter review process, and if they would be able to just give us a few words about how their experience went, and maybe some of their inputs on how it went from the beginning to the end, and that would be great, I think very instructive for us to hear. So Dan, if you'd like to come up and say a few words, I know you're no stranger around these parts.
Well, it was the first time that I was able to be on the charter review, excuse me, and I thought it went quite well. Unfortunately, we didn't have enough people to volunteer to come in and make a full committee, but for the ones that we had, everybody put a lot into it, and we discussed every one of these numbers, or whatever you want to call them, quite a bit, and what we came up with is what Josh read to you guys, and it went quite well. The only one that I had a question about, and I'm with Brenda on this, is that I think 10 years is too long to wait to have another meeting. It could be reduced to 7, or just leave it at 5 like it is, because in 5 years, there's going to be a lot of changes. And in 5 years, half of us probably won't even be here. So we need to keep our finger on the ball and make sure that we're going in the right direction instead of waiting too long to do stuff. And that's pretty much all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. And Mr. Gosnell, if I pronounce it incorrectly, I apologize, but
Thank you.
it'd be great to hear a few words from you, and thank you for helping out.
Enjoyed it. Absolutely thought it was phenomenal. But the part that amazes me the most is that you folks sitting up here were kind of like us sitting in that charter review committee. Some folks had different ideas on how everything should work and how it worked, but I thought the process worked great. I hate to mimic Dan, because he is somebody I know pretty well, but I think 10 years, I thought at the time, 10 years is just too long. But she called public meetings. We had 6 or 7 people. Everybody was energized. I just thought it was a great experience, and thank you for it. I enjoyed it. I really did.
Well, we thank you for your volunteerism and your service, and I think, without speaking for the committee or the city manager, I think that we'd just love to have some more people volunteer for charter review.
Mr. Gosnell's already volunteered for some things that we'll be bringing to you
Oh,
hopefully in the
great.
future. So.
Well, that's the first
I would say
step.
the process worked. And thank you, by the way.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Before we close out on the charter review items, I've had discussions with some of you about the clerk role falling under the council, and this would, I believe this is the appropriate time to discuss the idea of moving the clerk role under an admin, with the rest of the admin. I don't have anything to present. I just kind of wanted to open that discussion, if that's something that we would like to see added to the list.
We can add things before we bring everything to the ballot, right? We as council, doesn't have to come from the charter review committee.
Correct, yeah, you're within your prerogative as council to really propose a charter change at any time, but now is a good time, given all the other changes that were recommended.
And the main reason that I think it would be a good idea is, we just went through a review process, and I can attest to how much I struggled in providing quality feedback for the clerk, because I don't work in this building. My days are spent elsewhere. And so I can give limited feedback, but I think she deserves
Better.
high-quality feedback.
I agree. And I also, part of this too, with the council's decision to add on the communications director piece to that. Right now, Josh works for us, Katie works for us, Jim works for us, and Josh has the scope of the rest of the city under him. Katie doesn't have that, kind of under her. She'd have to go through us, and then there's kind of that separation there. So if we're talking about a communications director, she should be able to direct the communication for the entire city and not be, have to go through somebody else to push out that directive. So I'm all for it.
So we will hearing this, we'll go ahead and we'll get together and prep a resolution that would give you some proposed language about what that would take, and I'll package that with the other resolutions that we'll bring to you at the next meeting.
Okay. Well, if there's nothing else, I think we can move on to work session item number 3.
All right. And I'll actually let Naya introduce our next speaker.
I would like to introduce Mara. She has been with us since mid-February? 1st of March. Oh, gosh. Okay.
I know, time flies, right?
I know. I guess you condensed a lot of work in that time. She is a student at Wright State studying economics. And during her time here, she worked on a number of projects, including looking at complete streets, our fee schedule, looking at how our processes work and trying to get that summarized in a detailed manner so we can share that with our residents and developers in creating like a step-by-step guide. So I give you the lovely Mara.
Thank you for your patience tonight.
Can you pull your mic up just a little bit?
Yeah. Is that good?
Yeah, you're good to go.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Mara, and as Naya said, I've been with the community development team these past couple of months, and I'm presenting to you my ideas and research for the future development of Riverside, specifically road styles and safety.
Oh, we're using the wrong keyboard. I'm sorry, Mara. Do you have can you try that clicker and just make sure that it works? There you go. All right,
Oh,
you're
okay,
good.
cool.
Yep, take it
All right.
away.
So to begin with some background information, the One Riverside Comprehensive Plan was created in 2023 in order to bring together residents and harness the power of the future of Riverside economically and community-wise. Place prosperity and building foundations is what the plan is all about. For example, updating our already built buildings, expanding our bike paths and trails to make opportunities for new businesses and to work towards a community feel.
We all struggle.
All right. Along with the comprehensive plan, Riverside adopted the Complete Streets Plan. And the plans is completing our already built streets, which is a priority, filling available spots with businesses and community areas, which will boost Riverside's economy and increase outside visitors. Along with new development, we should also focus on what the residents say that we need, which I follow up later on in the presentation. And then this is just, I think, a good picture of just kind of showing what a complete street looks like. As you can see, there are elements like mid-block crosswalks, transit stops, wide sidewalks, street parking, bike lanes, landscaping, and streetlights. All of these elements combined just make up a complete street. There we go. Okay. Now with a focus onto our residents, I conducted a short survey with about 10 multiple choice questions about our residents' thoughts on road safety, walkability, and community. I got 15 responses from going to coffee shops and other areas around the city, just asking people who are willing to give their thoughts and feelings. And I must add, it was not a scientific survey. So here are some of the results from the survey, starting with transportation, which, to no surprise, most residents drive their car. And looking at the next chart, it seems like the majority of residents prefer to take their car. But a lot of the people who chose walking as their main form chose car, but a lot of the car drivers chose that they would like to walk, or they prefer to walk. In the bottom, you can see many of this. In the bottom, you can see that a lot of people would like to walk to work, school, and just anywhere else that they like to go on their daily errands and stuff. And what's preventing them from using their preferred method? A lot of people kind of already use the preferred method, but some say cost and safety, and then distance and accessibility. and then what are the other cities doing around, and what are their best practices. So, I looked into cities around the area to see what their plans for future developments are and to get some ideas for Riverside. I noticed many of their comprehensive plans were very similar, with a focus on making their areas more walkable and making the streets safer and adding more bike paths and stuff like that. They also talked about the ideal neighborhood roads. I'm aware that Riverside does not have the space for all of these features to be implemented into our residential areas, but I believe a couple of elements in this photo can be constructed differently depending on the area, such as like one-sided parking, sidewalks on at least one side, and barriers like trees and curbs to protect residents from oncoming cars. Okay, there you go. All right, and now on to walkability and road safety, and what does it look like here? So you guys might be wondering what walkability is, and it's the ability to travel to daily destinations within a city by walking in a timely and safe manner. All right, here's a picture from the Transit-Oriented Development website, where it shows the issues with common intersections that we see around our city. As you can see, corners are rounded so cars can continue their high speeds when turning, making pedestrians in a more dangerous environment. And along with the curves, it makes it so crosswalks are longer, making residents have to be in the road for longer. And also the lack of visibility for crosswalks is an issue for people trying to cross the road. For busier roads like Woodman and Harshman, I believe this picture depicts a good goal to achieve while we're in the process of improving the road. Adding lots of trees and greenery will actually, it has been proven to keep speeds down and overall making the road safer for everyone if there are lots of trees in the line of sights. I have pictures of neighborhood roads around Riverside, and some issues I see are, in the first picture is Elvern Avenue. There are no sidewalks and no barriers to protect walkers, but I also see there isn't a lot of space for these features to be added. And for Gramercy Road, you can see there's a double parking, making it a little bit more stressful when navigating the neighborhood when you're driving. Along with there is a lack of barrier between the walkers as well. And then lastly, there's Roar Park, which is in the same area as Elvern Avenue, and it has about the same issues there. And my idea to fix the issues of no sidewalk would be to have a painted-on designated area for people who want to walk outside. In this picture, it just shows like bikes, but I believe in neighborhoods it could be used for children and the elderly when walking to parks and just like their neighbor's house. I think it would also be safer because drivers will have less space and therefore they'll be more aware of their spacing on the road. Here's some more questions from my survey. I asked if the respondents feel that the elderly and children are safe when walking around Riverside, and I got a lot of maybes and no's, and so therefore I believe that we can make some more improvement there. And also, would our residents be open to taking public transportation just to help improve like our walkability? And I believe if more people took public transportation, then we could work towards a more walking-centered city. And lastly, I just asked if residents feel a sense of community within Riverside. And I got some somewhats and some no's, but I also followed that question up with where the places where they feel most connected to Riverside. And they said like coffee shops and school events. So I think that that's a good start, and we could probably implement some more areas where people will feel connected. And lastly, when developing our future plans, we should be thinking more about the environment. The heat emitted from concrete and asphalt in areas like Airway can increase temperatures by about 5 degrees, which is harmful to the surrounding environments and can actually make you feel hotter in the summer weather. I suggest adding like flower beds or trees in the dashed line areas to help battle the rising heat and to also increase driver safety, because a lot of people like to cut through those, I've seen. So I think with those, it will help organize traffic some more. And just an overview, I spoke about the comprehensive plan and ideas for the future, along with focusing on our residents' quality of life. Thank you guys for all listening to my presentation. I hope you guys took away some useful information.
Questions for our presenter?
I do.
Yes.
So when you looked at adding painted lanes for pedestrians and bikes, did you look at protective barriers for those? Was that something you considered?
I did consider it, but with our lack of space in the roads, I would say that it would be just an easier and more cost-effective solution to just paint on a designated spot rather than adding that in.
Thank you.
So did Naya make you want to switch your major to public administration?
Urban planning.
Well, my goal is to be an urban designer one day, so.
Well done, Naya. Well done.
We have enough in common.
She came that way.
I certainly enjoyed a lot of the environmental aspects that you wove into that, and for the seven of us to be very mindful about when we're reviewing site plans or there's a potential development in an area, what's it do for the city? And sometimes we might just think about how that might impact our ability to deliver services and maybe bring revenue up, but also is the long-term impact going to be positive or negative on the areas around it? So things like how we ask people to lay out parking lots, how we may or may not require trees in the future and use those as something to mitigate heat islands, which you were talking about in those big parking lots, which 50 years ago was the development that everybody wanted to have. They wanted to have great big parking lots with shops way in the back and everything off of the street. Now we're trying to bring things back. It's not always as simple as doing that when you want to retrofit. But I'm also glad you talked about the way that trees on streets can have a traffic calming effect, because a lot of people think that's counterintuitive. Like, no, I'll drive faster if there's, but that's absolutely true. That studies show if there's more greenery and trees, people drive slower, and that's easier than us putting in speed bumps, which we're not doing, folks. We're not putting in speed bumps. But I certainly enjoyed those aspects of the presentation, so thank you very much.
So is it within the realm of possibility or the intention to possibly consider road diets?
Sure, we can consider it. No, I think that, I don't mean to be flippant, I think Mara has an excellent point, which is that our right-of-way, and especially in neighborhoods, and especially in the older neighborhoods, is actually already fairly narrow by modern standards. So I would say it really depends. What I most appreciated about Mara's presentation is I think this conversation will be increasingly relevant for us. As we continue to get the budget in line up a capital plan and a program to try to tackle residential streets, the thought is, how do we use the right-of-way we have in the most effective way possible, balancing the amenities and the traffic with the maintenance costs? And that, I think, is where your question comes into play as well. So,
I'm thinking like the city I grew up in Chivia, they used to, their main road, or it's a different layout than us. They have a main city center. The main city center just shrunk the roads down by a lane.
Mhm.
And the idea of promoting walkability and creating that more kind of close-knit feel when you're downtown. And I know Riverside doesn't have a downtown, but that's where like my kind of thought process with like a road diet.
We did the road diet on Springfield Street.
Yeah, we took that down to one lane.
and you'll see that, we'll touch on it a little bit too, through the SS4A process as well for the Woodman corridor. The early thought is to actually reduce the lane widths, in part to buy ourselves more space on the edges of the corridor for multimodal, sidewalk, barriers, these sorts of things. So it also has the added benefit of calming traffic down, to the mayor's point, and reduces the amount of pavement we would have to shave and pave in future years. So these are concepts that we're trying to run with and bake into the day-to-day process of thinking through these infrastructure questions.
Yeah, and while we might not have what you described in your hometown, but I think with the bike trail kind of traversing north-south, we can really thread a needle there on Woodman Harshman and then on Springfield Street, where it might not look exactly like you would find currently in an urban design manual, but we could do something very unique with the opportunities we have. So exciting stuff. Well, thank you very much for that presentation, Mara. That was very informative and very enjoyable. Anything else for our presenter? If not, thank you very much, and thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Mara. And thank you, Naya, for all of your mentorship, Naya, too. Naya, I would say, is also an ace at attracting interns and giving them high-quality projects so that they'll come back and work for us. Like
That's a good
Tim in our
reputation to
community
have out at our
development. So-
colleges. If students are talking about they're doing really exciting stuff here, then underclassmen will hear that as well, and they'll want to be here.
Correct. So we've got a good team, a good thing rolling. The next thing I have for you is a quick update on the stormwater utility fee. So let me pull that up. And apparently my font has changed into whatever this typewriter font is, but I'll go ahead and.
Wow.
Moved away from the
What's
document.
this typewriter?
This is
What's that?
aggressive.
Were
I
you
know.
green barring that?
I hand key, I use Tom's old typewriter actually to hand
Put a
type it out.
cigar in your mouth when you were typing this.
Right, yeah. Clackety clack. Okay, so I've got 4 quick slides here, and just really quickly want to kind of give you an update on where stormwater utility fee is at. First, just a recap. This has been an ongoing conversation and an ongoing priority for the city council since I walked into the door. One of the first things that we did after I started was to discuss and adopt the stormwater utility fee ordinance. That was accomplished at the end of 2022. Since then, we've been focusing on building the back-end systems and putting those in place that are going to allow us to move forward with this. So that has involved the new finance system, the budgeting software. We've procured a module of the finance system that will let us do utility billing. We have conducted an internal staff review of all of the parcels in the city and tried to figure out, based on impervious surface area, what the utility fee rate would look like and how to model that against our capital needs and ongoing operating costs. That all happened last year. We worked with some outside consultants and CMT, our engineering firm, to draft a stormwater utility manual that is still in draft form, pending some of the conversation that we will have tonight and going forward into the future. And then I also retained a consultant to do an independent review of the staff analysis on parcels and to look at the impervious area on each parcel and help peer review and double check those calculations. So we have been working very diligently in the background over the last year and a half to try to keep moving this ball forward. There are some challenges. Initially, in the budget conversations that we had last December, the tentative timeline had been to try to unroll this later this year, going on potentially into 2025. We've hit some challenges with that. So the first is we've been without a service director for about 8 months, effectively. We've made an offer. I have a candidate who will start in July. In addition to that, the utility manual still needs some updates. A critical component of that is for council to set an effective rate for the utility fee. You'll recall it's been a while since that has come up at a work session, several months. Where we left it was initially the ordinance only requires that we adopt a 2-tier rate, one for residential and one for commercial. We can have more tiers than just 2, but 2 at a minimum. And at the last point that we left that conversation, there was some discussion on council about the residential piece and how to be more equitable among houses of different sizes and lots of different sizes that have different areas of impervious surface. Some houses in some neighborhoods are much smaller than other houses in other neighborhoods. So we had an equity concern there that we have been working to address that I'll touch on in a second. Next, there's an intense amount of communications that will need to go into this. So developing and then unrolling that communications plan will be important and continues to be important. Katie, our venerable clerk, has been playing point guard, really flying solo on a website upgrade, which will be instrumental as part of this process. We expect that website upgrade will be complete later this year, so that's also in process. We're also going to require some additional staff. So we have 9,300-ish parcels that will be involved in this. That will require some staff expertise to go through, monitor, as construction happens, as people file appeals. Those databases will need to be maintained and kept up to date. So there's an ongoing staff necessity, capacity question there that we need to address. And the last point is that we also need to get, like, my new service director in place, talking to the finance department, talking with community development and others about how is this data actually going to flow between departments. All that is to say, I don't know that 2024 is still a realistic timeline to accomplish all of these things in very short order. And due to the lift that's involved, part of me would feel like we would really be putting some of our newer staff completely on the spot to just jump right in very quickly on this issue, and I'm a little hesitant to do that. The other opportunity that's out there that I'll tee up is that our trash contract, I believe, expires in 2025. And so we have an opportunity to rebid that contract. I'll be in front of you in a couple of months, probably, with some options for how we can go about that. But one of the things that I think is worth discussing is that currently residents have to call Republic and set up their own accounts, and then they're responsible for billing through Republic directly. What has happened is that if a resident doesn't pay their bill, they go on a list, and then eventually Republic just stops picking up their trash if they don't pay. And then it's between Republic and a collections agency to try to figure that out. What that means is that Naya gets a lot of calls, and then Rob has to go out and try to enforce trash-related complaints if people are not maintaining their trash cans. What a lot of communities will do is adopt a single billing model so that the city pays the trash bill for all of the residents, and then the city bills the residents for the cost of trash service. If we're moving toward an environment where we're going to also bill for stormwater utility services, I think the opportunity in front of us is to avoid confusing residents and enroll a utility billing program all at once and say, we're going to charge for service delivery. You won't have to pay Republic anymore. You pay your utility bill with the city, and we will make sure that your trash gets picked up. Similarly, for stormwater utility, all of these things could live on one bill, and we could collect that bill, monthly, quarterly, whatever we decide.
Or not.
And then if folks don't pay, you would have the ability to levy assessments, and as we do for any other nuisance abatement that isn't paid or isn't collected.
Then it goes on property taxes.
Goes on property taxes from that point.
So I thought the initial thing was that if the residents would have the option just to have it assessed to their property tax.
I don't know that we are allowed to do that in Ohio.
We thought the county would help us.
Well, initially, yes, but I believe the county is now, well, I don't know about now, but the county is very restrictive about things that we can have them direct bill for us.
We used to do that with trash pickup.
Yeah, that's,
And then we had to change because they said, we're not your bill collector, which it's, when we did that and we changed trash, that increased our trash cost by 4% because we could no longer do it as assessment, because we used to do it, we paid the bill and then basically put it on everybody's taxes.
Right.
And we can't do that anymore because the county auditor said, oh, no, you can't do that, so.
For most of these things, they want to know that a bill has gone out first and someone has not paid and is delinquent, and then we are permitted to assess. So what I'm really driving at is, I think that the timeline here, if we are to move in this direction to try to do sort of a bigger thing all at once in a more comprehensive way, what that would let us do is, it would give all of us a little bit of a longer amount of time to do public education, to do that outreach. I think it prevents us from sending potentially mixed messages regarding what's being billed and when is it being billed and when is it effective. We can just do it all in one go. Gives our new staff more time to prep for rolling all of this out and to get those back-end systems and processes plugged in and put in place to be sure this is as streamlined as possible. I will not guarantee no errors, but we're going to do everything we can to make it as smooth as we possibly can. So what does that mean for us today? I think what that means for us today, in the context of stormwater utility, is that it's appropriate for council to discuss and establish a rate for what we would need to collect to get a stormwater program off the ground. That's been the main thrust of the ordinance and all the conversations that we've had to date. But I also think we should set that effective date sometime in 2026, which is 18, 19 months from now. And again, gives us that runway and that ramp to do the education pieces and get the back end of this all squared away. That way, that rate, if it's adopted by council, is out there, it's transparent, people know what's coming. Future councils can change it anytime between now and the effective date of that rate. And we can basically resolve that question so that we can move forward with all the other elements of the program that we would need to get off the ground. Then on a staff basis, what we will do is focus on onboarding our new folks, getting the stormwater utility manual finalized, which would include that rate piece. We will then procure any other contracts we need to with third-party billing services, because the part that we don't have answered right now is who's going to print our bills, how are we going to get those mailed, those sorts of questions. We'll answer those. We can start down the path of looking at utility billing specialists, get the communications plan in order and rolled out, and then again, work on the back-end data management pieces of this. Any questions on the proposed timing?
Well, I thought that the rate that we charged was also tied to our total cost based on projects that we're doing in stormwater. And one of the largest at the time when we started this was the Lily Creek. So do we have a list of projects? Do we know what those costs are? I mean, I know we were going to kind of add in some of the costs. Our services department already does a lot of stormwater utilities, so we'll be able to charge, but do we have all those numbers put together, or are those changing as we?
Those,
as
I
time
would say
goes
those
on?
are relatively firm. So the main concept there is, and I can come back with more information later if we need to, but the main idea is we took the stormwater capital plan that was approved or was conducted several years ago. And I believe the total construction projection was about $15 million in that plan. We inflated that based on inflation and then divided that cost over 20 years. It's about $1 million a year then that we would need just to do the capital pieces. And we would be able to offset about another several $100,000, $500,000-$600,000 in staff and ongoing operating costs. So then you add on, debt and other capital, because one of the things we've looked at is it's feasible for us to actually offer residents expanded service. We could buy, in theory, we could buy a leaf Vector pickup truck. Because if we run the pickup truck and we're keeping leaves out of the stormwater system, that's a utility-related expense. That's also a service we don't have today. And that would become part of the public education piece that comes along with all this. The bottom line is, assuming new programs like that and new staff and the current operating costs, we need about $2.1 million per year. And that's where to do the capital and the operating, and that's where the proposed rates that I'll talk about next also come into play.
Okay.
So these numbers are not arbitrary. These are
Josh,
not.
can I ask a question, please?
Sure.
Does
as long-
anybody have a problem with this?
Go ahead.
Our neighborhood has no drainage. We're all in septic tank and wells. How does this project help us, or why should we pay for something that we don't have?
Well, so the way that it works is that basically the stormwater utility fee can be used to pay for all of that infrastructure to actually come into your neighborhood. So it's similar to a road levy in that respect, in that these would be funds that are dedicated only for stormwater improvements, and they can be used on stormwater improvements throughout the city.
Right.
So that would include new construction. So we do have neighborhoods that flood. We do have thoroughfares that flood. We have what amounts to a highly disconnected array of stormwater bits and pieces that are all over, that
for
are
sure.
left over from the township. And the thought behind the moving toward a fee approach and implementing that capital plan is to start to connect all these in a methodical way over the coming years so that we can start to address these problems at the
Your
So we will be
neighborhood
getting-
is one of the projects that's part of that
Okay.
$15 million.
Because I had Katie bring up some information for me to see what, and of course, my neighbors are all concerned, because everybody says they're going to get charged for rainwater. And I'm just trying to get it together so everybody knows what is going on.
Yeah, it's
So we will have sewers, basically, or drainage.
Stormwater.
There was,
Storm-
yeah, the idea is to get a stormwater solution into all the neighborhoods, all the thoroughfares, all the rights of way to deal with stormwater in whatever way is most effective for that neighborhood. I don't want to tell you that means a sewer necessarily.
Yeah.
That would have to be engineered and everything else. But the other component of this is that that's curb and gutter, that's potentially sewer, it's culverts, it could be dry wells, it could be swales, it could be any number of infrastructure components that help to detain and trap that water so that it's not getting into your house or flooding people out on the street.
Well, because the next street over from me is Mary Ann. And right now, it's a lake.
Oh, I've been there. I've been there.
And it's been there, yeah, everybody has. And there was a solution for that was brought up some time ago that nobody ever moved on. And I think we need to address that at some point.
Well,
Because-
money, that's why nobody moved on it. There was no money to do it.
It don't take much to dig out a hole as a retaining pond, because it's already got some 15,000 gallon septic type tanks, and they could drain into a drainage pond. And Mr. Wise, who owns most of that property next to that church back on that backside, he already said it would be fine for him to donate or even help with getting that opened up and to do that.
The problem is
Of course, that would have,
drainage under Troy Pike. That's where the problem is. The water can't get under Troy Pike and over to the river. And so that whole engineering project is multi-million-dollar project.
well, yeah.
And that's how to fix that problem is to, they don't have enough drainage under Brant Pike.
Well,
that's-
that's why a retaining pond like they build in every new housing development.
Well, as long as it's not running uphill.
And Josh, you're just about to show us the fees, to how we're gonna pay for that, right?
Yeah, I can move into that. Just to tile this up. I don't want to get into necessarily the weeds, I guess, because there are other neighborhoods that also have similar issues.
Well, sure.
And there's water table and other constraints in each one of those. The main idea, though, is that this is a funding mechanism that allows us to actually address them.
Start doing it.
And to
Okay.
do it in a way that's proactive, comprehensive, and actually solves the problem and doesn't just put Band-Aids.
Long-term.
And,
Okay.
you know,
Yeah, I think the key word is comprehensive, because
Right.
as Sarah pointed out, even if we could find a larger retention pond, the goal is still to get stormwater to run to its natural point.
correct.
And if we can't accomplish that, then all we're doing, whether we realize it or not, we're likely creating a problem for folks down the road, just as, I don't know what year the houses at Marion and Ingleside were built, but when they were built. there-
56, most of them.
Oh, is that all? I thought they were earlier, but
Most
needless.
of them are about
but-
56.
but not having the infrastructure to take water away effectively has led to the challenges they face today, and that was unfortunately well before the city was a city and had
Right.
any ability to make sure that that was done properly, but. I
And
thi-
Troy Pike was not the thoroughfare that it is today.
Correct, so that any infrastructure there was probably overused in short order.
And rebuilt improperly, not giving them enough drainage
Yeah.
to get the water to the river.
So Josh, you wanted to, does that answer your question, Dan?
Yeah, it does. We don't have really much drainage problem on Beatrice, but on the next street like Mary Ann, it's horrible, which everybody knows that, and it's been that way for a long time.
It's been like that for a long time.
And that's
yes.
why, there's people concerned about what they're going to pay for. If they're going to pay for something that's going to help them, then we're all for it.
I think this will help everybody.
Yeah, that's the goal, is to address this comprehensively for the whole city.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
So just on that note, what the table in front of here shows is I guess, the proposed billing tiers for residential that I would bring to you. So as you may recall, the last time we discussed this, we had looked at potentially breaking out fees based on zoning district. We've moved away from that, in part because we're rewriting a zoning code, and we don't want to adopt a fee schedule that will become irrelevant once the zoning code is rewritten. The second piece is that I retained a consultant, Raf Tellis, who does a lot of stormwater utility work for us, who took a look at all of the, or stormwater utility work for communities all over the country, not just for us. But they did a peer review and actually developed an algorithm or a methodology based on square footage of impervious area. So what they did is they took a sample size, a representative scientific sample size of all of the residential property parcels in the city, and they compared the size of the house to the size of a driveway or a shed or any other accessory structure and came up with a ratio, and then compared the distribution of those square footages to develop 3 buckets, 3 tiers. So the first would be any area, any residential area that has between 150 and 2,200 square feet of impervious surface would be charged about $7 a month. The median would be properties between 2,200 and 3,600 square feet would be at $12 a month, and then the final would be the larger properties between 3,600 and 11,250 would be at $18 a month. This also has a relationship to what we will charge commercial properties, because the equivalent residential rate that we would charge a commercial property is the $12 per the average amount of residential square footage, which is compliant with our ordinance. What I'm driving at is, based on the math that they did and the scientific analysis approach that they used to try to derive these tiers, most property parcels in the city, you'll see this total number of our parcels, would pay right at that $12 median rate. And then if your parcel is particularly small compared to the median or particularly large, then that would affect your rate. It also, I think, this approach also gives residents some additional control that they would not have had under a zoning approach. For example, if you make a decision to build a giant garage and you have the space to do it, that would impact your rate. You may be bumped up into the next highest tier. Conversely, if you have a large garage that you're not using anymore and you don't want it and you tear it down, then you can appeal your rate and your rate will come down because you've planted grass or whatever else. So if we were to rely purely on zoning, residents wouldn't have that ability to impact their own square footage.
And there'll be other opportunities for residents to lower their rate, correct?
Correct. The Stormwater Utility Manual provides for specific actions residents can take to create credits or offsets. So for example, if you put rain barrels on your property or otherwise detain water or use pervious concrete that allows water to trickle through, those are the kinds of things that you can apply a credit for and receive a reduction in your rate. This is another reason why a utility billing specialist is helpful, because as those appeals and credit requests and other things come in, you need somebody who's paying attention to that, who then can make sure that the databases we're using to charge stay up to date. Any questions on the square footage tiers here for residential? Does this make sense? Is it?
I appreciate this so much. The equity concern was important to me, and also having the connect between what you're actually, the impervious surface that you actually have, and how much you pay, and driving resident behavior as a result of that. That was important to me too. So I really appreciate this solution.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad it was helpful. The plan then will be, we will proceed using these numbers. In order to adopt this, what would need to happen is the fee schedule, the omnibus fee resolution that we've talked about at other work sessions. There's a placeholder on that fee schedule for stormwater utility rates. What I would propose is that we will take these rates as proposed, plug them into that fee schedule, and mark it so that they're not effective until 2026. So it's not like this bill is coming tomorrow. We have plenty of time to get the word out and everything else and plug it into that resolution. And if the calculus changes between now and 2026, you as a council are well within your rights to revisit this or any other fee that's included on that list. But for the purposes of giving us what we need to move forward with the manual and these other pieces, we'll run with this and we'll include it on that resolution. Any other questions on stormwater?
I think we're good. Let's move on to our next Work
All
session
right.
item.
The next couple things I'll just go very quickly through. I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the meeting that I'd like to talk about the compensation policy. I'll just bring that up here very quickly. As you'll recall, last summer, we completed a classification and compensation study for all of the non-bargaining employees. Council adopted a compensation policy at that time. It basically says we want to remain competitive, pay attention to internal equities, these sorts of things. So at the time, we had included some specific language inside the compensation structure section about trying to maintain certain percentages of distance between different classifications of employees, like union versus non-union. Those were qualified, meaning they have to be within budget, we have to have the resources to do it, et cetera. In order to avoid confusion, especially given that we're now out of contract negotiating season, we're proposing some language here that would modify that, again, commits us to maintaining an appropriate amount of separation between grades and between union, non-union positions, but that we will remove the specific percentages in order to avoid people, I guess, like kind of keying into just a number when there are other caveats at play. The second proposal, and I'll provide you all with this language too after this meeting, but the second proposal touches on merit and cost of living adjustments. What a number of our peers do is they have implemented a model where staff typically get a COLA, cost of living adjustment of, it's fairly modest, in the past at least it's been, typically in January, on January 1. The COLA moves everybody's pay and it moves the brackets, so it moves the ranges as well. The point is to keep up with inflation or minimize the impact of inflation. And then in July, merit goes out, and that is another percent to another modest increase. And merit is awarded based on an employee's ability to live up to goals or to exceed goals that are set for them and the rest of the organization. In the first version of this policy, we had not yet addressed the COLA merit question because we were still doing that peer research to see what are folks doing around us and how do we feel we can best thread the needle. The proposed language here will allow us now to move more fully into a merit pay system. So if council adopts this language, what I would anticipate is that employees will receive, non-union employees have not had an increase since last summer when the class comp decision was made effective. So a single adjustment will be made this July for non-union folks, and then we will begin to follow this policy during the next budget cycle. So when we do the budget, I will tell you we've budgeted for X percent in COLA and X percent in merit, and I'll reflect those numbers in the budget, and you'll ideally adopt them as part of the appropriations, budget appropriations. But at least we will commit to that process. And the other thing that this encourages for us is, just speaking from my own experience, when I walked in, the past practice had been to do annual reviews based on anniversary date. Just personally speaking for myself, I find that intensely difficult to manage. I know other managers have as well. What this new system allows us to do is move toward regular reviews for all staff around the same time so that we can make sure everybody's getting reviewed and nobody's getting left behind in a review process. And then we can move forward and live more fully into a merit system from there. Last thing is that the resolution for this actually also incorporates this into the personnel manual. So we can make changes as needed by adjusting the personnel manual in the same way you adjust other personnel policies. And I'll provide you with that language, but happy to answer any questions on that. All right, hearing none. Last item. At the last business meeting, Mr. Flaherty with the Riverside Seniors approached council and asked to be considered for a donation. I wanted to let you know that the public function support line in the city council budget still has about $650 in it. I think his ask was for $1,000, if I'm not mistaken.
$1,000.
The common donation has been around $250. But I wanted to create a space for you all to have a discussion about whether you'd like to donate and at what amount. And if you decide that's something that you'd like to do, I can put a resolution together, bring that forward to you based on your conversation today.
The problem is, usually when we give a donation, is for a specific project of that organization. So we give to the Lions for Project Share, we give to the Stebbins.
After prom?
For their stuff, and Fisher Nightingale, and so there are specific things. And Mr. Flouty never gave us anything specific other than the organization in general. And I have a problem with that because it's the same as any other community organization that we have, the VFW, the American Legion, the Lions, the JCs, the multitude of churches that we have. And so I'm just not interested until I get something specific, more specific on what exactly that funding will be used for.
Do we have any written guidance yet for organizations that are asking for a donation?
No, we didn't adopt any as part of the council handbook update. In part, I don't want to speak out of turn, but my recollection is that I believe we talked about that, and I don't know that that was, I don't know that, I don't want to speak for you all, but I don't know that council wanted to tie its hands with a specific policy as far as what will and won't be
Right.
funded.
Because ultimately, it's our decision, right? I
Correct.
mean,
It's
that's-
your prerogative.
So it
Yeah,
says
I'm-
that-
Was there, I'm sorry, Brenda, was there like a
Yeah.
follow-up?
Well, I mean, you raise a good point. And I know that for, my involvement with Girl Scouts, we're not allowed to ask for donations to the troop. We have to ask for a project. And that is, I'm sure driven by tax guidance. And I don't think that would be a bad policy to adopt. And I would be interested in pursuing it. And so, for that reason alone, I think that I would recommend not providing a donation without a project,
I think that's.
Specific project.
without a specific project.
And that goes to like kind of a previous thing that I've mentioned, like council should have ownership of our budget, right? And right now, we had $1,500 that we said last year, but we put, now I got a question. It says that the 650 is encumbered.
It's encumbered on a blanket
On a
PO
blanket.
that has not been spent yet.
Okay, so. we
And in all candor, even if you had exceeded this line, or you had met the spending threshold for this line, I would tell you that if you made it a priority, we will make it happen. Like, we
Yeah.
can move money around in order to do something that you need to do.
There's other general activity lines.
Right.
In the general fund.
But the reason for that is it's a blanket PO.
Right. But I think council, as a good as budgetary best practice, we meet, like, we determine our appetite at the beginning of the year, when we do our budget process, how much do we want to allocate out to charities or organizations in specific events. And then, like Brenda said, they need to come to us with a specific ask. And the general rule of thumb has been $250. And I mean, if we kind of keep with that rhythm, that pattern, I think that sounds like a good policy. I don't know if we need to formalize it. I think it's just that more beyond the discretion of each board as they come along.
I think there's value in providing some guidance to those who would ask.
Certainly.
Well, I mean, having heard that guidance this evening, I'm more than happy to relay that to anybody that does ask. So, I mean, we can operate
I
under
would,
that.
however, though, Councilmember Fry, I would also want to make sure that guidance does not come off as someone in our community as, well, they'll approve it if I just tell them this.
Right.
Right.
Because I also want to make sure that we are making good decisions, and someone could come back in June and say, here's our project, and it's maybe just going to be going to the same thing.
Well,
I don't know. but I-
guidance could come in the form of a form.
Mm-hmm.
And on that form is what, please
Criteria.
please describe what
Yes.
this
Because
funds will be used
We'll do
to
that.
support.
We have donated to this organization in the past, right?
yes,
Okay.
very much so.
So in prior donations to them, have they had projects in mind?
No, this is a bit wrinkly. So what happened is that
This isn't a project-oriented group.
there was a resolution that was passed by council in 2009 that basically said that this organization should have a line item in the city budget, which is, I would argue, not the most appropriate way to go about a donation. And so part of the rationale for revisiting the donation question and other things, I think it might have been last year before you were on, was to address that question and to kind of put things to right as far as how the budget was going.
Okay.
So.
This kind of goes on a slippery slope fallacy too, is that we can donate $250. It's relatively arbitrary, and we could see the project that happens. We're donating several thousands of dollars to someone. We're not auditing their financials. We don't know what they're spending that money on.
true.
We can't validate that the city's not giving money to some like malicious cause. Granted, if you're coming to us, you have some gall if you're going to do something like that.
Well-
But it still falls on the city's responsibility that if we're not validating where our money's going, that we could end up with some serious egg on
Yeah,
our
that's
face.
why I don't want criteria to come across as like, you will receive the money if you check these 4 boxes. It's still our discretion, you still have to present to us, and we ultimately, council still has final say.
All right, well, I think what I'll do is I can certainly convey these sentiments. I think it forms a reasonable idea, so we can work on putting something like that together. And then if future request comes up, we'll have that at our disposal. The last item I have is just for folks, especially if you live around the Woodman corridor, to keep an eye out. You should be seeing a postcard go out in the next couple of weeks regarding the Woodman Drive Safe Streets for All study. Mad River Local Schools has graciously offered to host an open house, which we will be facilitating with our partners at Wolpert and the TID. Similar to the land use planning process, it'll be in the CO gym over at 801 Old Harshman. I'll give a brief introduction right around 5 o'clock when everything starts, just about the project, the corridor, the design, and then my understanding is it will be some sort of a round table or like a charrette format where you can go around to different stations and weigh in on what do you like about the Woodman corridor, what do you not like about the Woodman corridor, what do you want to see, and to provide that feedback. There will also be a digital component of this that will go out as well, but the postcard should look a lot like this. An ad also ran in the Dayton Daily News on Sunday. And so I just invite everybody who lives in the community, and even if you don't and you drive the corridor, we're trying to get as much feedback as possible. It's open house, come and go as you please from 5 to 8 on the 4th. And that's all I have.
Okay. We'll briefly go through council member comments. I'll start with Ms. Lomach.
Meanwhile, while we're developing this new plan, is there any way that we could ask the cost to illuminate the 35-mile-an-hour curve speed on Woodman Drive, like flashing light around the sign where it says it's a 35-mile-an-hour, to try to mitigate some of these issues of tearing up the fences or hitting the wall?
That's exactly the kind of feedback we're looking for.
But don't wait till we redo the road.
Oh, yeah, and I can certainly get with our engineer about all
If
that.
we could do something to make people aware that you should not be going around there. And I go 45 miles an hour and people pass me like I'm sitting still.
Right.
And so if we could put any kind of, I don't want a flashlight, flashing lights tend to scare people, but if that 35-mile-an-hour curve could be eliminated better than we're doing it. We just got a sign up there that said the curve is 35 miles an hour.
Well,
And that's where the issues come, is in that curve.
I can connect with the chief too about enforcement in that area, Chief Robinson. So,
Please.
yep.
Get a passive-aggressive letter sign that we can change.
And the other thing I would like to give a heads up to the Lions Club flower sale that's going on across the street from Stebbins. I hope that they've survived this rain tonight. They have a beautiful assortment of things for your mother or anybody you care about that you want to get flowers for, because they do so much with that money for the children in this community and elderly in this community. They provide food. If somebody's hungry and has hungry children, they will go to their food closet and take food to the house in the middle of the week. I mean, people don't realize what they are doing on a day-to-day basis. So if you're going to buy flowers for Mother's Day or for your loved one, consider going by there today. Well, they're closed now, but tomorrow and Saturday. And help them out because they're all volunteers. Nobody that's out there doing that is being paid anything. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Brown.
Just real quick, I just want to say, on behalf of my wife, Shannon, and myself, I want to thank the community for their support of our little free library we have on Silverleaf. Pretty much everybody knows about it by now, but I did want to mention, and a lot of people know this, about 2-3 weeks ago, we did have a little bit of a theft happen where they took some of the little decor pieces in our donation box and stuff like that. Nothing big or anything, but this past Tuesday, I came back from work and I looked out by the library and I noticed the donation bin was back. And I'm like, huh. So I went out and looked, and the donation bin had been returned along with the vast majority of the items that were taken from around the library, along with the note from a family member of the people who actually took it, said they were struggling with addiction. They were likely under the influence when they took the stuff, but they did return it with an apology letter, and we thought that was really nice. But also, we actually, my brother-in-law, who has a lot more carpenter skills than I do when I made the thing, actually constructed us a new library, and we're going to be doing a grand opening of that on Saturday, May the 25th at 4 p.m. So I'd like to invite all of Riverside, along with everybody in here, to come to that, and we'd love to see everybody out. We'll have snacks, giveaways for the kids, and lots of books for kids and adults of all ages. So love to see everybody come out for that. And also, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers. We love you, and thank you for all you do. And that's what I got.
Thank you. And I was at the first grand opening.
You were the ribbon cutter.
Yes, first time I met Andy. Mr. Joseph.
I got nothing.
All right, I have nothing as well, other than to say, echo what Josh said earlier in the meeting, and thank you for our staff. We are very, very fortunate to have the staff that we do, and I was so glad that when the local print media ran an article about our city manager, that he included my comments about the great team Josh has built. And Josh is pretty good, too. Moving on to Brenda. He's all right. I'll change my minutes.
He'll do.
Comment.
I'm very excited that I will be attending the CNU conference next week. So the presentation on the complete streets is a perfect segue into me learning a lot more about urban design, and I'm excited to bring back information when I return.
Be careful, once a bug bites you, you're going to be, are you going to want to learn is more? Or are you going to do is learn more?
You'll be a planner before you know it.
Yes, yes.
Next thing, we're gonna go to the GFOA concert.
That's right.
Or concert.
Yeah, they're going to rock out, too. Conference. We're not sending our council member to concerts, everybody. Mr. Denning. I'm sorry, Brenda, was that all from you?
That was
Happy
all.
Mother's Day to all, and that's all I've got.
All right, we have a motion from Zach to adjourn and a second from?
Second.
Second from the mayor.
Yeah,
All those in
and we're
favor
adjourned.
signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned at 8:34. Thank you, folks. Thank you.